What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, yesterday we had talked about that patch that was released 1.2 for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, but now that more people have had a chance to not only try out the game after the update, but also do some analysis, it turns out Gamefreak may have actually made the game worse in some aspects. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Final Fantasy XVI, as many previews dropped yesterday showing that yes, this could indeed be a contender for Game of the Year, and we'll also be going over a massive expansion that was announced for last year's Game of the Year. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton, and if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with Final Fantasy XVI, but FF16 on the PC. We know that there is a timed exclusivity deal in place for it on the PlayStation 5 console, about 6 months, after which it could go to PC, but it sounds like it won't just magically appear on Steam or the Epic Games Store in December after the 6 months are up. We can see this posted up over on Tweaktown, where they say Square Enix doesn't yet have a PC version ready to release when the PS5 exclusivity deal ends. Yoshi P says that he definitely wants to bring Final Fantasy XVI to PC, but doesn't know how long it will take, now referencing here it being 4 years after it debuted on console for Final Fantasy XV to go to PC. I don't know if it's going to be as long here as that was the Luminous engine versus Unreal, but it's pretty clear they're trying to tell everyone, hey, don't expect it at the end of this year or something. It could be a year, could be 2 years even, and it kind of sounds like, I mean, they are working really, really hard just to get this game out by their expected June 22nd release. So essentially, hey, if you have a PC and a PS5, you may want to pick it up on PS5 rather than hope that it shows up 6 months later. And also, that's kind of Square Enix and Yoshi P's job, is to try to get people to buy this game right away when it releases, because they have, I'm sure, some very lofty expectations for this game. Also, we had a bit of a twist yesterday as the PlayStation 3 got an update. Seriously, we can see this over on Sony's website. PS3 System Software Update 4.90. All right, let's take a look at the patch notes here, and it's system software update improves system performance. Now, some people were talking about this maybe being an update for Synavia, I think is how it's pronounced, and that was sort of like a piracy check for, I believe at the time it was burned movies, or like movies that were being filmed in movie theaters then with cameras, and it had something to do with the audio, and it could tell if it was a bootleg movie or all these different things. It's baked in Blu-ray players and all this, and obviously the PS3 at the time being sold heavily as a multimedia device with Blu-ray. So yes, it's weird to see an update for the PS3 as Sony has clearly moved on from it. They've attempted to even shut the store down for it, but they got to keep up, I guess, with the Synavia standards here for Blu-ray movies that you want to watch on your PS3, because technically it's still a good Blu-ray player. Oh, and we're just over a month away from the Super Mario movie releasing in theaters, but turns out you'll be able to see it a couple of days early. This was posted up on Twitter from the Super Mario movie account, saying the Super Mario movie is moving from April 7th to April 5th in the US, and in more than 60 markets around the world. The movie hits theaters in additional markets in April and May, with Japan opening April 28th. So I guess that means you'll be able to go see it earlier in the week then, which is good for me, because I would typically go opening weekend if I was going to see it, and then it's incredibly crowded, and it probably still will be, but in this case, I guess the initial burst of people going to see it will go and see it on April 5th and 6th, and maybe a little bit quieter at the theater for me that weekend, but hey, there you go. If you were someone who wanted to go and see it as soon as possible, you'll be able to check it out a couple days early. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Pokemon Scarlet Violet and Gamefreak. They did release that update 1.2.0, and they had quite a few patch notes in there. A lot of stuff they were working to address and fix, with the more important stuff seemingly being about the game crashing or having weird bugs and glitches here and there. They did some convenience updates, I know, with the Pokemon boxes and all of this, but as people have been able to download the update and try out the game afterwards, there were some odd discoveries that were made. Now, some people, I will admit, a lot of people were sending me videos and forum posts, all kinds of stuff, just going over their experiences with the update, which some of that may be placebo effect, to be honest. Others, though, were talking about issues with NPCs that were really far away and they were confused why the frame rate was like a quarter. I mean, that's just how it's been with this game. We've seen the windmills that go at like 2 frames per second when you get too far away, but there have been some pretty good accounts and even videos analyzing the patch after it was released. Like, for example, this one here that was shown by SwitchUp doing frame rate analysis and also checking out things when it comes to textures on the ground loading in. And somehow it does appear that Gamefreak has managed to make elements of this game worse. To be honest, the game already doesn't run that well, and it's already incredibly sporadic at times. You could have one section run decent, and then you come back like an hour later, and it's running worse, which does have to do with a memory leak that is well known at this point, and it's kind of strange that Game Freak has been unable to fix that memory leak since it launched. I mean, they've been able to sell 20 million copies of the game, they've been able to introduce and sell DLC, but the memory leak, when they can, right? I mean, if we're going by that leak that also talked about the Switch 2, it's possible that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet may not be in a great place, a decent place until the end of the year. Could we really go an entire year of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet in the current shape? Well, it seems like in some cases they're actually working backwards. Again, a lot of this showcased, for example, in the video there with frame rates being inconsistent at times, lower in different areas. Now, other parts of it, they did change like the population of Pokemon walking around in the field, which has actually worked to make the game feel a bit better in terms of not having Pokemon spawn in very odd and random places. And it's also worked to essentially make the open world feel a bit more barren, as you would expect when they remove NPCs and Pokemon. It's just a weird and unfortunate situation right now to have a Pokemon game that probably will end up becoming the best-selling Pokemon game ever, but also probably the worst-running Pokemon game ever made. So I would like to think that Game Freak is working to introduce a patch that will kind of go in the correct direction here rather than make parts of it worse, but I guess we'll see. I'm thinking, all right, if they got this most recent patch out at the end of February, probably a couple of months later, maybe in May, we could see the next patch. And I'm really hoping they have actual performance improvements to talk about rather than just discussing things with downloadable content and all of this. Otherwise, maybe we will be waiting for just a new piece of hardware from Nintendo that's backwards compatible to actually fix it. Hey, maybe that's the patch overall, a brand new system from Nintendo to run the game at hopefully 30 frames per second, 1080p. Hey, it's Game Freak, we'll see. Next up, let's talk about Final Fantasy XVI, which is up there with The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom as my most anticipated games for 2023. Everything we've seen up until this point with 16 has looked incredible. Trailers, interviews, all kinds of details that have gotten out there. I know there's some controversy, some back and forth on the combat, not necessarily being turn-based for a mainline Final Fantasy game, but nonetheless, let's go over some of the new information that got out there from previews yesterday, as Square Enix had many different influencers, reviewers, press outlets come out and play the game. It was really cool to get a lot of opinions on this, and I think SkillUp had a very good video showcasing some of his thoughts, so that's one I would recommend there to start. But also many websites also had some thoughts around it. So let's talk about some of the things I managed to pick out from these different previews, starting with the combat, which is indeed compared to Devil May Cry, and get this, God of War. In fact, it was interesting to hear the producers and directors around this game say, hey, this isn't a JRPG. We don't want you to call it a JRPG. And then you see the combat, it's action-based basically all the way around with a lot of Final Fantasy elements kind of being adapted to that. And trust me, I know there are a lot of Final Fantasy veterans, old heads, if you will. I mean, I'd be in that camp too, but I understand a lot of change has happened in the gaming industry over time, and turn-based combat is kind of being shunned a bit. And when you get to the cost of Final Fantasy XVI, how much I'm sure the money that they are dumping into it, they need to appeal to a wide audience. The combat looks awesome from what they've shown. And yes, it's going to be paired with high-end visuals, presentation that's through the roof. They were showing like these transitions from cutscenes into the gameplay, and it was almost impossible to detect it transitioning. That's how good the visuals look right now. Semi-open world, so they have kind of talked about it almost being like zones that you go between, which it's fine. Not every game needs to be a big open world style title. Story, it will focus on Clive, but there are other characters that will have kind of their own arcs throughout the experience. So good news there for people who are worried that it would just all be centered around one main character. The sound effects data that they have in the game, it's fed through the haptic feedback in the DualSense controller. So we'll have some pretty interesting things with kind of subtle vibrations depending on what's happening in the game or in the different cutscenes. Some of the stuff that really got me though in the videos that were showcased, the icon battles. Wow, they look incredibly epic all the way around. I mean, they're doing different camera angles. They're showing some incredible effects all the way around. So yes, it looks like those are going to be some massive, massive battles. And it's exciting stuff there. The game, 35 hours for the story with, they said 11 hours of cutscenes, seemed to surprise some people. But Final Fantasy has been very much cutscene heavy in the past. So I saw 11 hours, like, that sounds about right. 70 to 80 hours to 100% complete the game. And really at this point, I'm just ready to get the game. June 22nd feels like forever away at this point, but as we've seen every year, it just seems to go by pretty quickly. So I'm excited for Final Fantasy XVI. 1 month, I'm gonna get The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, one of the most anticipated titles for the year. And then the following month, I'm gonna get Final Fantasy XVI. So it's 2023, shaping up to be a really, really good year right now, and just a lot of releases coming out that have been pretty good, and it seems like we're gonna have an entire year full of big-time releases, with Final Fantasy XVI being right up there as a game that I am kind of expecting to be a Game of the Year contender, but of course, we gotta get there first, get it released, and see how everything turns out, but definitely looking forward to it. Next up, speaking of Game of the Year, let's talk about Elden Ring, which was the Game of the Year last year at the Game Awards, as we did get that anticipated downloadable content or expansion that was announced. We can see this posted over on Twitter. This from the Elden Ring account. Rise Tarnished, let us walk a new path together. An upcoming expansion for Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is currently in development. We hope you look forward to new adventures in the lands between. By the way, this exploded online. I mean, we're talking over 40 million impressions on Twitter alone between a couple of posts from their official social media accounts. So yeah, a lot of excitement around this expansion, which I think is a key word there rather than something maybe a bit smaller. This sounds like it could be substantial amounts of content, and that's exciting. Could be a whole other section of the world that gets introduced, new bosses, new areas that I'm sure will be highly imaginative, new weapons, and all these different things. And the funny part about this, I said, you know what? We talk about how downloadable content, if it's released too close to a game when it comes out, you see some outcry, some frustration online, right? But now I'm thinking of Elden Ring, and I'm like, it's been a little while since I've played it. I'm going to go back to that game and just get absolutely demolished and feel like I have to relearn many aspects of it. Whereas if this had just come out a month later after Elden Ring released, I'd have been on it immediately and just rolling right through the downloadable content. But we need more information on this. A lot of people are trying to speculate around just that one screenshot, that one key art that was shown here. So just hopefully not too much longer and we can find out all about this new expansion. They announced it like 3 days off from its 1 year anniversary. Seems like the 1 year anniversary would have been the time to showcase this, but I guess close enough. We'll just have to keep an eye out for more information around the Elden Ring expansion. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about something that really shouldn't surprise anyone based on their most recent release, which is Forspoken. As it appears, Luminous Productions is being folded into Square Enix in a very PR speak kind of way. We can see this posted over on Square Enix's website, where it is titled Reorganization within the Square Enix Group. Square Enix Holdings announces that it will merge its wholly owned subsidiary, Luminous Productions, into its wholly owned subsidiary, Square Enix, effective Monday, May 1st, 2023. The merger is part of the company's efforts to further bolster the competitive prowess of the group's development studios, a goal set forth under its current medium-term business strategy. They've developed numerous AAA high-definition games and possesses a wealth of intellectual property and content. Luminous Productions is meanwhile equipped not only with AAA title development capabilities, but also technical expertise in areas such as game engine development. Combining the two entities will further enhance the group's ability to develop HD games. So basically what's happening here is Luminous Productions spent years and years and years making Forspoken. It comes out and it just didn't do well. So Square Enix looking around, and trust me, Square Enix right now is certainly in this mode of, okay, where do we cut expenses, or where do we work to make our workflow more efficient? Really looking at Luminous Productions and the state of Forspoken when it came out, that Luminous engine has, it's been rough for Square Enix. They wanted their own engine rather than have to rely on something like Unreal, which they've had to do with Final Fantasy X Remake, and as we've seen with Final Fantasy 16, they've done it with Team Asano and the HD 2D projects, all of this. Unfortunately, the Luminous engine just has not worked out. I'm sure the amount of money it took to develop it and create it probably, in their mind, wasn't worth it, but they have a studio with Luminous Production with clearly talent to create that engine. So now essentially dissolving Luminous Productions, but bringing a lot of the talent and developers within Square Enix and assigning them to different roles, I'm sure, for other projects. And as we talked about before, all it takes sometimes is one game to just not do well, and that's kind of it for the studio. In this case, though, Luminous Productions, they had Final Fantasy 15, which I feel like sold well enough for it to at least have made sense. But Forspoken, it has not done well, really, at all, especially not with the lofty expectations that we keep hearing Square Enix has for many of their games. So that was kind of the last straw, and Luminous Productions now being folded into Square Enix, and we'll see what other projects Square has for them, but kind of taking the technical prowess that they have at Luminous Productions and maybe pairing it up at different parts of Square Enix with some of the creative and game direction talent they have there, sure could lead to some, I think, pretty good titles, but this is, I assume, a move we won't see really the results of for many years when some of those projects start to come out. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday. We're asked, how do you feel about Final Fantasy XVI real-time action-based combat? Look at this, almost half, 47% say I like it, 36% say I'm open to an action Final Fantasy, but I need to try it first. Yeah, that makes sense to me, right? 16% say I don't like it, Final Fantasy needs to be turn-based. That's what I saw quite a bit on Twitter and other places. It's like, nope, Final Fantasy has to be turn-based, but I feel like we've been working away from that for a while. Even 12 was a bit different, right? So you have to go back to 10. That was the last true, like, straight up turn-based RPG for Final Fantasy, and it's pretty clear the production, the budget, all these things behind Final Fantasy 16, they have to cast a wide net. Going more action RPG is something that could eclipse 10 million units sold, and based on really the visual style, everything they're dumping into this with the talent behind it, it would probably limit them to go full turn-based. So this is just what they had to do in the current climate, and I mean, a poll like this kind of reflects that. And I mean, you can look at it this way, if you like the turn-based stuff, Square is still producing that with some very traditional JRPGs from Team Asano with HD 2D that I think is a bit more manageable when it comes to the budgets as opposed to Final Fantasy 16. They celebrate when something out of Team Asano does 1 million copies sold. Do you think Square Enix would celebrate if Final Fantasy 16 sold 1 million copies? Well, maybe if it was in the first 5 minutes, but if that's kind of their lifetime goal with Final Fantasy 16, they probably have a problem then. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Panda saying, for DLC, where I stand is that if the base game is complete and can be finished to a satisfactory degree without purchasing any extra content, I'm cool with it. If the DLC is required to get the true ending, or otherwise invaluable content for the game, then I have a problem. Well, I mean, yeah, if they lock like a secret ending behind an extra $10 or $15, yeah, it's gonna be annoying. Or the one that really got me was the on-disc downloadable content. It was essentially stuff you've already bought that's on the disc, and when you went to buy it on the digital store, it was 1 megabyte. I think this happened with Resident Evil 5, if I'm not mistaken. It's other games as well, but I remember people were buying it, and it was like 0.5 megabyte, and everyone's confused. Turns out people started looking into it, and it was just content that was on the disc already that they had locked away. Yeah, that's pretty aggravating. But to me, if you get a complete experience out of the game, and oh look, there's extra content that the developers and the studio had worked on and wanted to put out there to extend the story further maybe, or do side quests or just something extra to add to that universe, yeah, I'm fine with it. I think the conversation, though, around how long you have to wait, that's the whole thing, too, because Elden Ring probably would have been nice to get the expansion a bit sooner, because I know going back, I'm just going to get wiped out over and over again trying to get used to the controls and a lot of the mechanics. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here. Today was the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet patch. Let me know if you've been playing it since the update and if you've noticed anything weird, whether it's running worse. Hey, maybe it's running better for you. And then also, what about Final Fantasy 16 with some of those previews? What do you think of the combat being much more action Devil May Cry-like? And are you excited for the Elden Ring expansion that hopefully is set for release here pretty soon? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.